Mhm. Oh, hello everybody. I hope everyone's doing well. Happy full moon in Virgo. Nice to see all of you. Man, it's a beautiful full moon, as a matter of fact, and it's actually a really exquisite evening in Los Angeles tonight. We got a whole bunch of clouds roll in, and it feels kind of stormy, which is very strange weather. But yeah, I wanted to talk about this full moon in Virgo for a lot of reasons. Number one, because it's the final full moon of winter. I'm sorry, right before spring. So it has a lot of significance and a lot of purpose. Um, the moon in Virgo at 27 degrees is conjoined to my sun in Virgo. So this has a lot of weight on my natal chart, this particular full moon. And this full moon is also in a trine with Pluto in Capricorn. And so the last time I came on a live stream was to talk about the US Pluto return, which we are still going through and will be for some time. And this full moon is tapping into that deeper layer, that root, if you will. So it resonates, and we're going to be talking about the Pluto return again. But hi, Scott. How are you doing? Oh, you're in Los Feliz. Nice. Yeah, it's super beautiful. Oh, you're welcome. My pleasure. And hey, if anybody has any questions or anything they want to ask about, the themes I'm talking about, full moon stuff, astrology stuff, please let me know. But I'm just going to wrap for a little bit. I want to talk about what a full moon is. First of all, let's start with the fundamentals because a lot of times I forget that this is new for some people. There was a time in my life when I had no idea what was going on with astrology. I had no idea that there was any pattern in any of it because I just didn't know. So when we say that there's a full moon in Virgo, what that means is that the moon is opposite to the sun. The moon is full when it is exactly opposite to the sun. And so, of course, what that means is that the sun is exactly opposite in the sign of Pisces. So, if the moon is at 27 degrees Virgo, the sun is at 27 degrees Pisces. And that's what a full moon is. A new moon is when the sun and the moon are conjoined, when they come together. So, this pulse between the sun and the moon happens every 2 weeks. We have a new moon, they come together, they create new energy. Then they break apart and they create this fullness of light in the sky, which we call the full moon. And what's great about full moons is that they represent the culmination of the lunar cycle. So everything's coming to a climax. And literally, there's light in the night sky, light enough to see in the dark, right? And what that symbolizes is that the things that are normally hidden from view in our psyches, the subconscious layers of reality, they come more into view. They are illuminated. So the darkness becomes light. And why is that important? Why is that so healing? Because when our unconscious feelings, our unconscious thoughts, when repressed psychic matter is allowed to come to the surface, is revealed to us at a conscious level, it invites healing and integration. And that is what full moons offer us. Every single month, we have this cycle of integration and healing. Now, this particular full moon in Virgo is especially associated with the theme of healing because that's what Virgo is all about. Virgo is the sign of the virgin, which is not a sexually naive young woman. Virgin in the ancient world actually meant earth priestess, a woman who devoted her life to the earth, to the job of being a priestess, to the natural order of, or I should say, the natural law of nature, which is natural order. And so a virgin was a woman that didn't get married. Instead, she devoted her life to being a vessel of the earth's wisdom. So she was a priestess. And this meant that she lived outside of the normal social paradigm for women. She lived in a completely different world, and her time belonged to her, and her obligations and responsibilities were very different than that of a wife. And so, this is the distinction between virgin and wife. And so, yeah, it's not the same thing as somebody who's never had sex. It's very unlikely that the virgins in the ancient world never had sex. But, anyways, they did live a devotional life. And so, this idea of being in alignment with natural law, being in alignment with the order in the universe, that was their profession, that was their job. And they were there to not only create that order, but also to work on behalf of that order. So they would speak the wisdom of the earth. They would guide people to get back into alignment with divine order. And at the very core of every kind of healing art is this very essence. Every kind of healer, whether it's a Western doctor or an acupuncturist, what they're trying to do is get you back into order so that you can heal. Health is a result, it's a natural result of being in balance, being in order. And so when you're disordered, when you're imbalanced, disease arrives. And that's true of the physical body as well as our mental health, as well as our emotions, as well as our society. So it's microcosmic and macrocosmic. So the moon in Virgo has this energy of summoning things to come back into divine order. And in order to do that, we have to go through this really big healing crisis. And I would say that this particular full moon has within it a very bitter medicinal quality, but that kind of bitter medicinal quality that is cleansing, that is purging, that is really, really good for you. And, your herbalist wouldn't give that to you unless you needed it. And that's kind of how the energy of this full moon is. The way that the moon and the sun are interacting right now is the sun in Pisces is conjoined to Neptune still. It's leaving that exact conjunction, but nevertheless, the sun is already asleep in Pisces. It's already super drifty and dreamy. And the sun in Pisces conjoined to Neptune is already so dissolved into this abyss. It's this incredibly mystical, dreamy energy. And what it really is tapped into is the soul of the world. And so each one of us during Pisces season is more in tune with that larger sense of presence, the soul of humanity, the soul of the world, and how we fit into that. There's a less, I guess, crystallized sense of self, and there is this more merged consciousness that comes through, which is incredibly open and it's incredibly dreamy. But my God, when the world is at war and things are so dark, being connected to the world soul is quite disturbing. It has a lot of pain, it has a lot of suffering in it. And so the sun in Pisces is drifting through these very dark waters right now at the end of the zodiac. The whole cycle of the zodiac is coming to a close. There's a lot of toxicity flowing through the waters right now, fear, panic, honest to God, just evil, corruption, a lot of things flowing through it that have come out in great storms. Those energies are very active right now. They're always there, but they're very active right now. It's storming. And the moon in Virgo is now looking straight at the sun in Pisces, reflecting its light. And finally, for the first time, the sun in Pisces can actually see itself in a mirror. It's just like how I can see myself on this screen right now. It's shocking, but it's also really helpful to be able to see yourself, right? Because that promotes something we call self-reflection. Without the capacity to self-reflect, you can't really learn or grow or transform. There's a really essential component to thinking and growing and transforming that is dependent on self reflection. And so that is what the full moon represents. The sun is coming to its final days of Pisces, and it's finally getting to reflect on itself with the moon staring at it. And the moon is not just a mirror, though it is that. It certainly is a mirror. It provides the sun with someone to talk to. It's having a dialogue, a self-reflective dialogue. It's almost like in therapy. It's like that kind of conversation. The moon is a mirror, but the moon is also its own presence, its own energy, its own influence. And so, what the moon does, the moon governs cycles of growth. The moon governs the tides, the ebb and the flow of everything in creation. And even people who don't believe in astrology do understand the moon's influence on our planet, right? The tides, and certainly the way that um, there are a lot of correlations to the moon cycles that we could get into, but it seems to have an effect on every level of consciousness, not only plant life in the oceans, but the way that we feel as well. Like, I can't sleep at full moons usually. Um, but the moon in Virgo having its own influence is looking at all of the dark waters, all of the psychic toxicity, all the pain that the sun in Pisces is floating in. And it wants to help. It says, I can see you. I can see you across the zodiac. I know what you're going through. Let me do something to balance this energy. Let me bring back order. Let me create order out of chaos. Let me bring things back into balance so that health can be restored. And so that is the macrocosmic influence of this full moon in Virgo. It's trying to help each one of us, microcosms of the macrocosm, to come back into some kind of alignment. The experience of that can be really painful because a lot of healing practices, they require a lot of crisis, a lot of detox. Detox is never pleasant. A lot of healing hurts. There is this quality to going through a genuine healing that really is painful. And so, if you have been feeling particularly moody, depressed, anxious, anything like that for the last couple of weeks while this moon has been building, and I really, really have. So, you have my sympathies. I've been straight up depressed. It's been really hard. Oh, like hard to get up in the morning. When I wake up in the morning, I'm like, where am I? Oh my God. And I have to really pull myself out of bed, pull myself together. It has not been easy. But fortunately, I have my husband helping me. He's been really good. He's been cool. And I know that it will pass. That's the thing that really helps. So if you have been feeling that, it's because everything's been building up to this really intense, purgative full moon. Let me see what you guys are saying. Sasha from New Orleans. Oh, as an herbalist, bitter medicine is some of the best. That's right. Exactly. Bitter medicine is cleansing for the liver. And that is essential to being healthy, right? Bitter medicine is the best. And the worse off you are in terms of toxicity, the more bitter it tastes. When you're super cleansed and aligned, the bitter medicine doesn't taste that bad. Isn't that interesting? So it's like the very thing you need becomes more and more abhorrent to you. It's so strange. It's such a strange thing about life, but it is true because nature is our teacher. So a lot of times it's that way with practices that we need, teachings that we need, people that we need. When we get really, really dark and toxed out, we can feel very much adverse to their company or their presence or their influence. And so that's the kind of complex emotional sphere that we're in right now. That being said, this is all a very good thing. This full moon is very helpful. The essence of Virgo is devotional and healing. And therefore, this full moon's energies have our best interests in mind. And it's kind of coming to a head. There's a catharsis that's blooming right now. And I feel like that is worth appreciating because, yeah, the waxing moon period was very intense and things kept intensifying. But this is the moment of truth. This is the climax. And after this, at some level, we're going to get to breathe a little bit of a sigh of relief. And that doesn't mean our problems all go away, but the tension within, because something's brought back into balance. Let's see, Scott. Oh my God, me too, and everyone else. I can feel everyone's energy and take it in. The sun came out from the LA clouds. Stellium Leo here, the full moon demolishes me. Yeah, it does for a lot of people. The full moon demolishes a lot of people. Like I said, I can barely sleep during full moons. Usually, there are some exceptions, but it's this weird thing where I just, I'm like, my eyes are open all night. Like, I guess I'm supposed to go run out into the woods or something, but I live in LA too. I can't really do that. It's intense. It's very, very intense. And if you are not connected to it at all, it's still going on. And that can be even more ungrounding. At least we are reconnecting to these cycles that actually govern the energies of our planet. Whether modern science wants to acknowledge it or not, they do. And it's very helpful to know what's going on so that you can be more patient with yourself. There is a real ebb and flow, rise and fall to everything in creation, and the moon is just our first teacher of that. Noni B, hi. You said, do you think there is any particular significance for people with natal moon in Virgo with this full moon? Absolutely. I mean, if you have natal moon in Virgo, this moon has either it's been waxing over your natal moon, so crossing it, as well as the sun in Pisces having recently opposed it. So this axis, meaning the opposition between Virgo and Pisces, is very significant for you. It's very important. It would be very emotionally purgative for you, even more profoundly than for other people who don't necessarily have placements here. I don't have my moon in Virgo, but I have my sun in Virgo. So it's been very intense for me in that regard. But absolutely, anytime there is a planetary return, whether it's the luminary, the moon, which moves so fast, or Saturn, which moves so slow. Anytime one of these planets returns to the place it was when you were born, it's significant. And the moon is so quick. It moves through the zodiac every month, it's really fast. But the moon is like a trigger, and when the moon crosses your moon, it opens up your emotional energy. It opens your emotional body to some potential evolution. So, yeah, we are evolving, ever evolving, very rapidly ourselves in some ways. And our emotions being so wild, so vacillating, so open to it's called emotion, for Christ's sake. It's motion, right? So, when the moon crosses your moon, that's a significant moment every month when something in your emotional experience, something in your emotional body is being developed, matured, up leveled, challenged. It can go any way with emotion. But always pay attention to that if you can. That's one easy thing that you can start to look at when you want to learn more about your chart. And that being said, watching the moon touch all of your planets in your natal chart is also really useful. If you think it's too complicated to follow all of the planets, just start with the moon because it's easy to follow and it moves through the zodiac every month. So you can do journaling and watch the moon cross every single point in your chart and take notes as to what is going on. That's where I think you should start if you want to dive into transits. It's the best place to start. Okay, so what was I saying? So this full moon. Every full moon has this tension in it because it's an opposition, right? The tension is also very reflective, like I said, and it's trying to encourage integration of opposites. So we always hear about that in psychology. This is a very ancient idea that Carl Jung got from alchemy and astrology, for sure. He was a hermeticist. And what he did was brilliant, and he was most definitely a genius. And what he actually did was translate ancient hermetic ideas into what was, in his age, modern philosophical thought, which isn't so modern anymore. He was writing in early 20th century for the most part. So it seems kind of antiquated now, but nevertheless, what he did was brilliant. But his ideas for how the human psyche is structured and what needs to be done in terms of creating that natural order, that balance that I was talking about, that Virgo is so much associated with. Um, he got all of these ideas from astrology, from alchemy. So the basic idea of the integration of opposites is everywhere in astrology. And one of the most basic examples is at the full moon. We have the solar energy, which is masculine. We have the lunar energy, which is feminine. We have the projective and the receptive. We have the electric and the magnetic. It revolves around all of these polarities, as well as the polarities between the zodiac signs wherever the full moon is. So in this case, mutable water Pisces and mutable earth Virgo. The full moon brings up the tension, but also reveals an opportunity to integrate these opposites, to have the sort of yin yang effect where these two energies begin to swim into one another, begin to serve one another, begin to exchange, have a mutually reciprocal relationship. So when Pisces and Virgo are just sitting there in the zodiac across from one another, they are opposite and they are unintegrated and they seem very far from one another. But a full moon in opposite signs actually weaves the two signs together, creates that tension, but it also gives them cause, it gives them reason to create a dialogue and to begin to exchange energy, which is what's happening right now. The energy in the Pisces side is way stronger. It's way stronger because there is also Mercury and Jupiter and Neptune in Pisces as well as the sun. So it's not exactly like balanced scales, but nevertheless, the wisdom of Virgo is finally getting to balance out some of the extra dissolved, extra dreamy, extra confused narcotic haze that's in Pisces. Pisces it's a beautiful sign, but it's drunk. It's a beautiful place full of inspiration. It's the realm of dreams, but it's also lost. It has a real abysmal quality at the same time that it has this transcendental mystical quality. So it needs a little balance. And yeah, a lot of us feel very deeply hurt by what's going on in the world right now, not just because it's being rubbed in our faces through mass media, though that is the medium through which it's happening, but it's happening during this time when so much energy in Pisces is really opening up the collective emotional waters. The world's soul is being made so much more vulnerable and so much more sensitive. And it is overwhelming. We don't feel so compartmentalized. We don't feel so individualized. And that has its benefits. That's a deeply cosmic, spiritual, transcendent way to look at humanity, but it can also be really overwhelming when you don't want to feel everybody's feelings, or you are feeling everyone's feelings and you don't know how to handle it. But I do have a tip. Taking showers with sea salt and scrubbing your skin down with sea salt is really helpful, actually, for neutralizing your energy field. It really, really works. I got my husband into it. He was like really skeptical at first, but after he tried it, he's obsessed now. So I really recommend scrubbing yourself down with sea salt.
Before and after rituals.
Yeah, before and after rituals, after being out, or when you're just feeling overwhelmed. All right, you guys, let's see. Hi, Scott. Mars and Virgo for me. Oh, yes, Mars and Virgo. It's a very useful Mars, not like warmongering Mars. I always think of Mars and Virgo as it's more like the surgeon rather than the soldier, the medic, not the warmongerer, but the one that uses like very sharp tools for a great purpose. Noni B, thank you. I'm just learning about astrology. Oh, I'm so glad you like my newsletters. Yeah, keep it up. It's a very useful language. It has a lot of uses. There's a lot of skills that you can pick up by studying astrology. And I feel like, in my classes when I teach astrology, it's been something that's amazing because people of from all different kinds of backgrounds and disciplines can integrate astrology into what they're already doing. It's fascinating. I've had school teachers that are like, I'm going to use this to some degree to understand my students better. Maybe they don't have the whole chart, but whatever they can understand through the birthday. Certainly, holistic healers, certainly, therapists. It's very diverse the ways that you can use astrology to enhance what you're doing. And it's also just really fun. So I hope that you continue your studies. Okay, so this moon is trine to Pluto in Capricorn. And a trine is actually a harmonious aspect. So, what that means is that the moon and Pluto are actually making very beautiful music together. That's one thing to know. They're not fighting each other. The moon in Virgo is very good with Pluto, it knows how to communicate. And this is the same Pluto. That's the Pluto return Pluto in the in the United States. So, this is it's a very dark and complex energy. This is a very deep portal into the underworld. But nevertheless, the moon in Virgo knows how to speak to Pluto right now and is gaining access to the Plutonian depths for sustenance and strength. So, what this full moon in Virgo is using to heal us all, what this full moon in Virgo is using to create the medicine that's bringing back order and balancing things, is this deep, dark Plutonian transformative alchemical influence. It's digging into the underworld to bring back up to the surface something that we need. And I would say that it symbolizes a lot of things. I mean, there's a lot of ways to interpret this, but one of the things that I'm reading that as is Pluto in Capricorn is actually digging so deep, looking for truth, for integrity. What is really, really true for you? What do you really, really believe in? What do you really want to build your foundation upon in life? Not the things that you think you should think or the things that you've believed in that were just conditioned on a surface level. Pluto and Capricorn is inspiring us all to find a place that's so deep within us that it's actually strong, it's real, it's full of integrity, it's true. So, the thing that we're being healed with right now is truth. And that can be really painful again because every one of us struggles with honesty. Every one of us has our own issues with facing the truth. I certainly have. It's hard. It's really, really hard to look at things sometimes. Like, my husband and I still we have a lot of debt. We went to school. So by the time I graduated with my second master's degree, I had to admit that university was just like Scientology. It was just like this false religion that kept taking money from me and promising me higher and higher levels. And it was a very painful realization, but that was true. That's like a Plutonian truth. There was no difference between school and Scientology, except that I gained more useful skills. But ultimately, um, the debt is still there, a lot of it, and it's painful to look at. And a lot of times I find I can't even look at it. I just ignore it. I throw it in a drawer. It like legitimately physically pains me to think about it and look at it. And that's something that came up this week. That's just one tiny example. That's one sliver. But the truth will set you free. I mean, this is just universal wisdom, and it's true again and again and again. So, whatever we're not able to face right now about ourselves and sometimes about our world, it's best to let it present itself. It's best to let yourself be confronted with it so that you can be set free once and for all. And this really is a liberating full moon because it's the last full moon of the season, like I said. And the spring equinox in the northern hemisphere is only a few days away. I mean, it's this Sunday. So today's Thursday. That's a few days away. This is a really great opportunity to let go of so much, to purge, to cleanse, to be free of some things that have been really weighing us down so that we can start the spring with a very fresh energy, with a fresh outlook. Um, and the astrology for March has been really hard. I don't need to tell you guys that. The astrology for April is also going to be a little bit hard, but it's different, and I will talk about that in a second, but let me see what you guys are saying. My moon is 29 degrees in Virgo with Saturn and Mars. Wow, this is an intense full moon for you, Lynn. This is a very intense full moon for you. Oh my gosh. Saturn and Mars. Wow. So that's going to be extremely heavy and it's going to be prone to stagnation. So, Lynn, I want you to be really easy with yourself, really, really cool, really easy on yourself, especially with all that Virgo, because you're so prone to perfectionism and self criticism. Try not to do that right now. Try to be as easy, breezy, and Piscean as you can to balance all of that out. Um, and when the spring comes, we're all going to get a bit of a refreshing energy. And I have a gift for all of you. I'm giving a talk, or it's actually a class, I guess, on Sunday to celebrate the spring equinox when the sun moves into Aries. And I wrote a class called Fire, the Power and the Glory of the Sun in Aries. And you're all invited to come. It's totally free because the sunlight is free and we should all be able to share it freely. So if you want to learn more about the sun in Aries and connect with the radiant power of the exalted sun in Aries at the equinox, please come. You can click the link in the description below to sign up for that. And I would love to see you there. It's an amazing class. It's actually, it's all about the magical power of the sun in Aries, the mythology of the sun in Aries. It's an astrotheology class. It's really deep. It's cool. You guys should come if you are going to be around. And even if you're not, you can catch the replay. So you don't have to come live to actually participate in the class. After I give the talk, the video will be instantly available at the same link. So sign up for Fire and celebrate the spring with me. Okay, so I want to talk about the Pluto return and what's going on astrologically right now. So I talked about the Pluto return on February 22nd, and it was all about how, the United States is experiencing the death and rebirth of its empire, right? And it was actually really about how the United States was never really supposed to be an empire. It was never really supposed to turn into this monstrous thing that it has become. Nevertheless, this is what's happened. And the Pluto return is the moment of truth for the United States when all of that over imposition of imbalanced power has to be faced and has to be brought back into some kind of alignment. So essentially, the United States has simply become sort of the mast of the ship for a larger global imperial enterprise that has many names, but we all know what it is. It's the global project that wants to control everything. The people with fantasies of world domination. It's grown and amassed in size and concentration of force throughout the entire 20th century. And up until this point, it's really become an increasingly smaller and smaller world in terms of who holds all of the power, who calls all the shots. In my country, the United States, I think a lot of you are here as well, has become the sort of epicenter of that. But that doesn't represent any of the people in the nation, and that doesn't represent people in any nation, right? And it's been a great struggle and a great tragedy. But this time is when that begins to change. So I gave that talk on the 22nd, and I believe the war in Ukraine began like 2 days later, maybe even the next day. I'm a little bit bleary about when that all began. It's a little muddled right now. It's been really overwhelming, but it was like within 24 to 48 hours. And again, like I'm an astrologer, I believe in astrology, but sometimes things like that are just too much for me, even. I'm like, I can't even believe it. The timing is just, it's too much. Um, So I think it's important to just kind of talk about that for a moment. the um, the war in Ukraine, which began at the U.S. Pluto return, how does that make any sense? You're like, this is a war in Ukraine, not the U.S. Well, it does make sense because the United States' Pluto return is about it losing some of that centralized power, that ability to control the entire world through the dollar, through its military, through all of these things that, it really hasn't been on top of the world for that long, historically speaking, really only since World War II. So that kind of short period of world dominance is coming to an end. That doesn't mean, however, eh, that doesn't mean that our country is going to be destroyed or that we're not going to have anything good happening. I actually think it's a very good thing ultimately, but unfortunately, when these big tectonic shifts happen in the world, these great tragedies erupt. So I'm not trying to make light out of this terrible tragedy that's going on in the world because I am very much against war, no matter what's behind it. I don't support it. Period. It's really terrible. So, just from the astrological lens, though, this war is the first sign of the world breaking apart into smaller, smaller epicenters of power. So there's not going to be just one world power. There's going to be multipolar power. There's going to be a lot of different centers of power, meaning currencies, economies, cultures that are self contained and don't listen to what NATO has to say, things like that. And that's just what the astrology reveals. And the United States has been at this strange, like, epicenter of all of this for so long. My entire life, of course, and my parents' entire life. So it's all we know, but that isn't meant to last. So a lot of people immediately panic and they read this as something terrible. I don't think it's something terrible necessarily. There's a lot of painful things that we have to go through. Transformation like this is not easy. So I'm not trying to oversimplify it. But it does not mean that there can't be great prosperity and great cultural achievement and great joy. Like I said in the first video, the Pluto return does indicate that there could be a tremendous renaissance in the United States. And if it happens in the United States, there's going to be these sort of renaissances happening all over the world. So the darkness can't continue to just get darker and darker and darker without some kind of regeneration, some kind of rebirth. And I feel like that's coming and it's coming soon. But right now, things are very difficult. The war erupted under the conditions not only of the Pluto return, but Venus and Mars were in a planetary war. That's the traditional term for it, meaning that they were conjoined for so long. They were chasing each other through Capricorn in February when this all broke out. And then, until March 12th, there was the ongoing war between Venus and Mars, even in the sign of Aquarius. So that just dissipated on March 12th, where the energy of Venus, which represents love and peace and harmony, quite seriously, love, peace, and harmony was being sort of overwhelmed by and trampled by Mars, the god of war. Now, why have things not chilled out after March 12th? Well, because now Venus is stuck in between Mars and Saturn. So she got away from Mars, but now she's in this weird rock and a hard place, literally. She's between a rock and a hard place. So now she's stuck, she's sandwiched between Mars and Saturn. In this case, Saturn is not a benevolent influence. Saturn is hard. Saturn is kind of tyrannical in Aquarius. That's what we've really learned. And Mars and Saturn in Aquarius is an energy that has brought us a lot of strife before. The last time that Mars and Saturn moved into Aquarius was in March of 2020. March of 2020, Saturn moved into Aquarius, and so did Mars. And now that pattern is repeating. And Venus, the planet that brings us the influence of harmony, at the very least, without promising peace and love, just the ability to create harmony. She's really being overcome, trampled on, and restrained by these two planets. So she's going to be stuck in between Mars and Saturn until the 28th of March. Finally, on the 28th, Venus is going to conjoin Saturn, and we're going to struggle with a sense of blocks, like a block, a challenge, something that's slowing us down. And finally, she'll get onto the other side of Saturn and move into Pisces on April 5th. Now, the promise of peace I cannot bring. I'm not going to promise anything, no matter what. But even after Venus escapes from this really difficult energy with Mars and Saturn and moves into Pisces, that will be nice. There will be a sweetness that comes. There will be something softer for us to tap into. There will be harmony that we can feel anyway. There will be some promise of peace that we can at least dream of more easily. But in April, we have a really difficult beginning of the month with Mars and Saturn conjoining in Aquarius. So that conjunction is really felt on April 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th. It's really, really tight at the beginning of the month. And that's also when we have the new moon in Aries. So 2 weeks from now, this full moon is going to begin to wane. The moon's going to lose light. And it takes 2 weeks for the waning moon to then be reborn as the new moon. Well, that new moon on March 31st, April 1st, depending on where you are, 2 weeks from now, is really when the Mars-Saturn conjunction really starts to get tense. And those are two very malefic energies, as they say in astrology. Malefic meaning they are unfriendly. They're somewhat destructive. They tend to bring forces that cause problems. So things are looking really tense until at least the first week of April. And of course, there's a lot that's being stirred that's going to take a while to resolve. But that's the tension that's building right now. And I thought you guys should actually know. And then during this month as well, we have Jupiter conjoin Neptune. And that's probably something that deserves its own live stream because it's such a big transit. It hasn't happened since 1856, Jupiter and Neptune in Pisces. So it's really rare and it's really important. And it has a lot of beautiful potential. There is so much that's exquisite and magnificent about Jupiter conjunct Pisces. So it will definitely be a balanced talk that I give on that. There's a lot of good in it, but there's a lot of danger in it because of what's going on in the world and because of how close Mars and Saturn have been to each other. There's a real danger of slipping into propaganda. That's the best way to just summarize it. There's a really strong pull to get people to believe something so strongly that they just slip into some manipulation, some lie. You know, propaganda is going to be really powerful at this time. Not that it's not right now, but it looks like a danger zone around that time. Like it's going to be really easy to get caught up in something It's going to be really easy to believe something that's not true. And that's just because of the influence of Neptune and also how tense everything is coming up to that point. But we'll save that for another time. I think Jupiter and Neptune deserves its own dedicated time because it's really important. And like I said, it's rare. It's something that hasn't happened since 1856. For those who are interested in thinking about like what to expect in April, though, it's like very tense at the beginning. The middle, when the Jupiter Neptune conjunction happens, softens things. Even if you're going in the wrong direction, it brings this sort of softness. And by Taurus season, again, I'm not oversimplifying things. I'm not saying everything's going to be better. But by Taurus season, we're going to feel like things are more stable and like more balanced. Not so tense, increasingly tense to where we can barely handle it. And this is in our personal lives as well as how we're seeing things play out on the world stage. There's an idea in astrological philosophy that, the weaker your energy field, the weaker your constitution, or the lower your vibe, I should say, the lower your vibe, the more the planets mess with you, the more that malefic transits will actually cause problems for you. So the best thing that we can all do is never, ever, ever be personally afraid of a transit. That's not the right way to approach this information. The same way we're not afraid of physical weather. There's no need to be afraid. Um, and the best thing you can do is prepare for weather. Like if it's going to rain, grab an umbrella. If you know the energies are going to be really, really tense, and there's going to be a lot of things trying to pull you into propaganda, prepare accordingly and don't put yourself in super vulnerable positions. Take things with a grain of salt. You still have free will. We still have free choice. The thing about Mars in Aquarius is that it's a freedom fighter. It has a lot of good values and good ideals. But the problem is we have people going to war, each side believing that they're the ones with the high ideals. Russia has invaded Ukraine, believing that it represents very high ideals. And Ukraine is fighting back, and NATO's backing them at some level. The United States is backing them at some level, believing the same thing, like we have the high ideals. So that's why it's a war, because the Mars and Aquarius stuff's coming out in both sides, and it's really intense because Mars and Aquarius is brutal when it comes to fighting for ideology. That's what it's about. It's about ideology. It's not even so much about land as it is about whose ideology is going to win. And those are the most brutal wars, especially in this era, this information age, right? So, yeah, the world is always going to war over ideology. I mean, religious wars, same thing. And this is a religious war at some level. And that's kind of what's going on with all this Aquarian energy. So how do we balance that in ourselves? Just make sure that you really believe what you believe and you know why you believe it. And don't let other people change your heart, One thing that I try to remember is, people are always trying to change laws. And that's good. I mean, we need laws. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't. But a lot of people get overwrought about changing laws so that people can be free or people can be protected or people can change this about society. But laws never change hearts. Laws are not the thing that dictates who we are inside. Laws cannot make people good. Laws cannot make people harmonious. There's a deeper level to consciousness that we want to work on if we actually want to improve our lives, right? So Mars in Aquarius is really about, changing the political ideology. So it's even bigger than laws. It's like, it's fighting for paradigms. It's fighting for worldviews. And both sides are going to believe very strongly right now that they are in the moral high position. So we just have to try to stay very grounded and stable and know what we believe from a deeper place so that we don't get torn in half and dragged around, right? Let's see. Scott, as an activist and organizer, it's amazing this decentralization of colonial US power, right? It's happening rapidly. Like, I've been talking about it and I still can't believe how fast it's happening. I'm actually like, I'm in a bit of shock. Like, because whether I agree with it or not, whether I think it's a good thing or not, it's all I've ever known and it's happening fast, you know? De-dollarization. I'm hearing this word all over the place now. So, yeah, it is amazing. Even happening in nonprofits and systems within Los Angeles, decentralization of power. Wow. Yeah, the microcosm and the macrocosm, right? That's what Hermeticism reveals. If it's happening at the macro level, it's happening in tiny places. And if it was happening in little nonprofits and churches and companies, then it's happening in governments too. You know, you cannot divorce the relationship between the small and the large, the micro and the macro. So it's just an influence that's happening at every level of human society right now. And it's fascinating. Not all of it's good. I mean, some of it's going to be really difficult and strange, but I think a lot of it's really good because it reflects the reality of nature more vividly. And that's just where I'm coming from. You know, nature is our teacher always. And there's nothing in nature ever that is not flourishing with variety, mutual reciprocity and variety, and a lot of organic flow. There's never just one kind of plant for miles to see, unless you're talking about Monsanto cornfields, which is a symptom of this centralized power, this world of monotony and, you know, monotone, monotheism, monoculture. Far worse than being monotonous, actually. Monoculture is extremely dangerous because it's completely and totally unnatural. There's no such thing as monoculture. So you cannot create a monoculture of human values. You can't create a monoculture of food and music and art. You can't create a monoculture of plant life without doing tremendous damage, which of course that's what, you know, Monsanto cornfields have done. They've wrecked the soil, killed the bees. I mean, the trail of death behind a Monsanto cornfield is obscene, and we all know it, and nobody likes it or wants it. And it's kind of like that. That's like the perfect symbol to describe this political order that seeks to control the whole world. You know, it's like a Monsanto cornfield they want to make out of the entire planet and every person on it. It's not a good idea. And I am glad to see that it's waning. De-dollarization doesn't necessarily mean that the United States can't be a prosperous country. In fact, the natal chart of the United States, which I went over last time I was on here, reveals that this country is meant to be very wealthy. It's a wealthy country. They chose the natal chart well. Benjamin Franklin was an astrologer. There are many quotes where he admits this, talks about it very frankly. This was not a dark secret. Benjamin Franklin was an astrologer, and he was the one that chose the dates for the United States' natal chart. And he did so for a lot of great purpose, which I'm sure I cannot even divine all of the reasons why he chose the natal chart that he did. I think I can see some of them, but it's a very rich chart. And so, what that says is that the United States can bounce back. It can go back to being a very wealthy nation and perhaps a much happier, more prosperous nation than it has been in a very long time, because it's not going to be built on so much corruption and slavery and, you know, monoculture. So I don't think anybody's happy with the system that is in place right now. So we're at a time where we're saying goodbye to that. and things are going to be rapidly shifting. There's going to be a tremendous momentum of invention. There's going to be a lot of tragic things going on, like the war in Ukraine, which is not at all cute or something that I think is a minor issue. It's not a minor issue. We could be on the precipice of World War III. I certainly hope not. I don't support war at all. So I love Ukraine and Russia because I know what it's like for the Russian people. I know exactly what it's like being an American to be sitting there watching your government do something in your name that you have no connection to it so all. And in fact, you absolutely despise, and they're ruining your life over it for no reason. So I feel deeply for the Russians as well as the Ukrainians, and I'm sorry that everybody's going through this right now. I hope it's over soon. All right. The Fear of Civil War, 1856. We are revisiting the feeling. Oh my, that's so bizarre. Yeah, there are some things lining up that are similar to that time in the Civil War. What is different, though, is what was happening to the United States' natal chart. At that time, there was like a square to the United States' sun, I believe, from Saturn, which kind of really brought on the Civil War. But the Pluto return is pretty intense, so we'll see what happens. Okay, like we are in a civil war anyway, of sorts. The way that war is waged now is like it's covert operations, it's psyops, it's intelligence, it's information, it's sorcery. It's all of this information age, etheric stuff. We're not going to see anything that looks like war was back then. But at some level, we certainly are at a civil war right now. It's just incredibly messy and covert, right? It's difficult to find the center of it. It's really difficult to know how to even begin and definitely how to end. Robert. Hi, Robert. Hello from New Orleans. I love New Orleans and I wish I could go back. I want to go back soon, but I'm just like so not traveling right now. I don't want to get on an airplane anytime soon. It's just airports were bad enough before. I'm just not doing it. If I go to New Orleans, I guess I'll drive. Jake Reese, are you running for governor? No. Do you think I'm crazy? Oh my God. Oh, hi, Christine. How are you? 1856 is after the Civil War. In the United States, I'm pretty sure that the Civil War was during the 1860s. So it was the precursor to the Civil War. 1860s was the Civil War. I can't remember the exact year, though. Sorry, I didn't do my homework before class. All right, so bringing it back to some joyful news. I really do think that we're all going to have some things to enjoy about Aries season. There is a beautiful spot in the middle of April. There's Venus in Pisces. That's exalted Venus, by the way, everybody. Exalted Venus is romantic, magical, magnetic. Venus in Pisces is the perfect time to fall in love. It's the perfect time to get back into your art. It's the perfect time to just get really, really deeply enmeshed with something that you love, whether it's an art or a person. It's also really beneficial for healing our hearts, healing our finances, all kinds of things like that. And with exalted sun in Aries, which don't forget to sign up for FIRE, the power and the glory of the sun in Aries. The link's in the description. It's a free class all about the sun in Aries I'm having on Sunday. You can watch the replay anytime. But with exalted sun in Aries and exalted Venus in Pisces, there's no doubt going to be some really beautiful celestial music. And we also have Jupiter in Pisces, which is really, really nice as well. And we're not going to be having Jupiter in Pisces for that much longer. The month of April is the last full month that we get to enjoy this energy. So May 11th, Jupiter's going to move into Aries. That's going to really rev things up. So we should enjoy the month of April for a lot of its gifts. It's got a lot of ripe fruits. As I said, there's some knots. There's some things that we're going to be feeling the vice grip and the tension. I promise that it will start to alleviate after the first week in April, though, at some significant level. Um, and in the meantime, just try to stay calm no matter what you hear. Nobody knows exactly what's going to happen in the future. Definitely not astrologers. And I have stories. um, uh, I have stories. I've seen some things amongst conferences of professional astrologers who start making wild predictions about things they do not understand. And it's ridiculous. You see why Voltaire threw it out back in the beginning of the Enlightenment. It's like I'm on his side in that regard. But that's the same with all methods of predicting. Economists do the same thing, political scientists do the same thing. It's not because astrology sucks, it's because people get really arrogant and overblown and they start claiming that they know things that they do not. So, none of us know the exact shape of the future. And there's a reason for that. It's because we're creating the future ourselves right now through our collective imagination. So, we can look at weather patterns, we can see when things are going to be really tense, when things are going to loosen up. We can see what the elemental weather is going to be like, but we get to choose. So remember that as well. Like, just try to stay calm, try to stay on the smoothest surface that you can. And whatever you got to go through, I learned this technique from this self help lady named Mel Robbins. I don't know if you guys know her. I judged her at first because I thought she was like a boring normie. She didn't look cool. I'm so mean like that, you know? She just looks like she's like a really sweet middle-aged Midwestern woman. But she's a normie, she's a normie. And anyways, she's a really brilliant woman and she actually teaches all kinds of super magical things, meaning like hermetic wisdom coming through her. But she doesn't call it hermeticism. She's a self-help person that likes to use a lot of science to justify why these things work, which I also appreciate. Even though I don't do that myself, I really don't care. When other people do, I appreciate it. But anyways, she teaches to stay calm when you're having a lot of panic and mood swings, which I definitely have the last 2 weeks, like I said. That you literally just you put both hands on your heart and you have to breathe and you have to close your eyes and you have to tell yourself, I everything's okay, I'm safe, I am loved. And the reason why you do it is because not only are you doing the mantra, which is good for you, but you're actually holding your vagus nerve. And this is like actually a button to turn on your parasympathetic nervous system. And all of us have two nervous systems, right? So the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. Parasympathetic nervous system is the only nervous system that does all of the really great things like healing, great healing, transformation, relaxation, being in flow, totally tuned in, tapped in, turned on. That's parasympathetic. When we switch into the other nervous system, that's when we get hit by panic and we get paralyzed. That's when trauma comes up and we freeze, these things. So I've been trying it out. And look, it's not like taking a drug that makes your panic attack go away. It's not like an instant relief, but slowly over time, it does actually begin to train your nervous system to cool down. So I recommend doing things like that, anything that works for you in that regard, because it's really easy to get tripped up and put into a bad state of mind right now because there's just a lot coming at us. But we got to stay cool, calm, collected, and understand that everything that's happening, astrology wise, is actually for the benefit of humanity. All of these are evolutionary influences that are trying to bring human consciousness into flower, into being, into an elevated state, into new forms. So that is the principle upon which we must rest our interest in astrology. The planets are not trying to kill us. They're not trying to hurt us. They are
They just want to bash our fucking brains in.
yeah. Right. It's like The Shining. All right, you guys. So Venus in April. Yeah, me too. I have a class on that as well that I'll share with you all. Venus in Pisces is my favorite time of year a lot of the time. I mean, it really is, it's blissful. And I really look forward to the month of April for that. So Venus is going to escape from Mars and Saturn on March 28th. Prepare for that. And then Mars will have a little tussle with Saturn. It's going to be yucky. And then finally, we'll get to start blissing out a lot more, relaxing, unwinding, feeling better about life in mid to late April. Okay, everybody? So I'm going to say good night. Happy full moon in Virgo once again. I look forward to coming back and talking with you all again, probably about Jupiter and Neptune. But hey, if you want to learn something specific about astrology, if there's a topic that you want me to cover, leave me a comment and I will do my best to see what I can do about coming on and discussing the matter. Also, if you haven't signed up for my Sun in Aries class this Sunday, it's free. So you can click the link in the description and you are invited to come join me live to learn all about the Sun in Aries, or you can watch the replay anytime. And it's the same link. There's really no difficulty there. It's easy. So easy breezy, and hope to see you there. I will talk to you all later. Happy full moon once again, and happy springtime if I don't see you on Sunday. Okay, good night, everybody.